Hello and welcome to this program called Books of the Book. We're so happy that you are able to join us and in this Bible study. My name is Davey Rodriguez and we are studying today the Gospel of John. And in particular today we are in chapter 11 and we're going to talk about the resurrection of Lazarus. And with us in this study is Dr. John Pauline. He is a Bible scholar and he comes from Loma Linda University in Loma Linda, California. And we want to thank you again, Dr. Pauline, for being with us. We're so happy. We're so delighted that you are able to share your insights in this gospel. And you shared with us earlier in another program that you love this gospel, this book, because you said it's a spiritual one and so many spiritual applications. And you also mentioned a favorite verse in this gospel, which is chapter 3 and verse 20.
Verse 8,
which tells again, what does it say and why is it important to you?
The wind blows wherever it wants to. No one knows where it's coming from or where it's going. So is everyone who is born of the Spirit. And it encourages us that when the Spirit comes into our lives, we don't become cookie cutter people. Rather, we become uniquely who God intended us to be. And that for me is very exciting.
Amen. Well, now, if you do have a Bible with you and you want to join us in this Bible study again, we are in chapter 11. And thus far, we have been studying the life of Jesus in this gospel. And we have learned, Dr. Pauline, that Jesus is defying the leaders of the church. We learned in chapter 2 that he disrupts worship. Chapter 5, he heals on the Sabbath. Again, disrupts worship in chapter 7. He's accused of blasphemy for calling or for placing himself as God. Chapter 9, he's healing on the Sabbath one more time. And chapter 10, blasphemy again. Now we are in chapter 11. So tell us, what is the context here and what is now Jesus going to do to defy the leaders and to make them upset?
There's been conflict all along there, all 6 of those, as you point out. And I don't know if this is intentional or not, but it's fascinating that the first and third encounters with the religious leaders are in relation to a worship service that gets disrupted by Jesus' presence. The 4th and 6th of these are accusations of blasphemy, and the 2nd and 5th are relating to the Sabbath, accusations relating to the Sabbath. So it's like you have 2 sets of 3 in which an incident related to the Sabbath is between a couple of other incidents. So I find that interesting. Really with chapter 11, this is therefore the last straw. In other words, the raising of Lazarus is the final thing, and from that moment on, people are saying, okay, we've had enough of Jesus. We got to get rid of him. So right after the Lazarus story, you have the story of the Sanhedrin coming together to decide what to do with Jesus. If we let him go on like this, everybody's going to follow him, and the Romans are going to come and destroy our temple and our city and everything, so we've got to do something. So the raising of Lazarus becomes the final provocation, not what you would think was intentional by Jesus. I mean, he's simply raising a friend. But the fact that he could raise the dead like this, it just brings to an end, I think, the opposition which has been trying to resist the idea that he is Messiah and even God. But when he raises the dead, it's kind of like, okay, now what do we do? This is going too far.
Now, so now we are in what the chapter says, Bethany.
Right.
This is a place where he has friends.
Bethany is a small village on the other side of the Mount of Olives. So it's very close to Jerusalem, 2 or 3 kilometers from Jerusalem. And it's a place that Jesus, when he was in Jerusalem, would often spend the night there. So he was there with friends. Something I should mention, that the rabbis at the time had a teaching that when a person dies, the soul of that person, not all the rabbis really understood the biblical perspective, on human nature, which is that body and soul are one, that we're a complete unity. That's very clear in the Old Testament, but some Jews after the time of the Old Testament began to read Plato and Philo and some of these Greek philosophers and come up with this idea of a division between soul and body. So that's being reflected here. But those who believed that way thought that when a person died, the soul would kind of hover over the body for 3 days. Mm-hmm. And if the person didn't come back to life, it would then, just go off to God or wherever they thought it might be. So the point here is that after 3 days, they believed there's no more hope. Now, you'll notice that Jesus delays a couple days before he comes. The sisters send and say, your friend is sick. And instead of coming, Jesus spends 2 more days there and then comes, and he arrives on the 4th day. And what does he say when he arrives?
We are in verse...
Yeah, I think it was verse 15. You read it to me before.
Okay.
I'm glad
for your sakes that I was not there, that you may believe. Nevertheless, let us go to him. Now, this sounds a bit disrespectful, a bit rude for Jesus to say, I'm glad I was not there. Mm-hmm. So his good friend has died. Mm-hmm. His 2 sisters are mourning, mm-hmm. and Jesus is glad.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What's with that comment there?
Yeah. Well, it appears, I think if you go back to chapter 7, you realize that Jesus' timetable is not set by friends, by mother, by brothers, by anybody. Jesus' schedule is set by his Father. And so Jesus delays 2 days, not out of disrespect for Lazarus, but because he does not sense that the Father wants him to go just yet. He apparently is not aware that Lazarus has died when he actually comes, but he's glad that he delayed, because now the glory of God can be seen. Mm-hmm. And so he arrives 4 days in. Raising Lazarus at the 4-day period is an undeniable miracle. Nobody's going to doubt it. This is indisputable. And so the delay ends up showing off the glory of God, as we see in verse 4.
Now the disciples seem to be confused for what Jesus said. And earlier he said that our friend Lazarus is sleeping. And and so I go so that I can wake him up. And so verse 16 says, Then Thomas, who is called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, Let us go also that we may die with him. That's after Jesus said Lazarus is dead. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know what Thomas means by that, to say, okay, let's go with Jesus that we may die with him.
I think he's reflecting back on those 6 encounters with the religious leaders that the gospel has been full of. Time after time after time, Jesus has been in contention with them. And the last couple of times, they pick up stones.
So when he says, let us go that we may die with him, referring to with him Jesus, or with him who is already dead, Lazarus?
No, I think he's saying there with Jesus that Jesus is going to die. If he goes back to Jerusalem, remember, they are by the Jordan because of the encounter. When he was last in the temple on the Feast of Dedication, he says, I and the Father are one, and they pick up stones to stone him. This is the 2nd time. So the disciples are saying, don't go back to the temple. Every time you go, they're ready to beat you up, Don't go there. So Jesus takes his disciples at the end of chapter 10. They go out into this quiet place, and the disciples are glad that, things are a little better. But now Jesus wants to go back into the lion's den, and Thomas says, all right, let's just go with him and be done with it.
They're ready to die for him, at least Thomas.
At least Thomas
they say they're ready to die.
And this is doubting Thomas.
This is
doubting. See, that's the thing. He's not really doubting Thomas. He was put in an unusual situation when he was doubting, and it turns out in chapter 20 that God was able to use that situation to set the tone for the entire gospel, which I think is powerful. The real doubter in Gospel of John is Philip. He's the one that's constantly questioning, and do we have enough bread to feed all these people? hey, Lord, you said we've seen the Father. Come on, I've never seen the Father, you know. And so Philip's the one that's kind of...
So doubting Philip would
yeah,
be more appropriate
perhaps.
in his case.
But I guess Thomas did the more spectacular crime, you know. It's the person with the really spectacular crime that's remembered, I think, and that's where Thomas gets it. But he, in this case, is the one who really expresses courage.
I'm going to go back to this idea of Jesus saying that Lazarus sleeps. Why did Jesus say that Lazarus is sleeping and later he says that he's dead?
Mm-hmm. Well, sleeping was a way of saying that a person is dead in the ancient world. You know, when a person's dead, kind of like this, looks like they're taking a nap, etc. So this is widely, you know, in the Greek world, in the Jewish world, and so on. But I think it's an excellent reference to death, because as we see with Lazarus, the death that we suffer in this life is not the ultimate death. It's like a sleep. It's a diminishment of death when Christians use this term. Because the death that really matters is eternal separation from God, or what Revelation calls the second death. So here, when he says Lazarus is asleep, it's one of those misunderstandings. You know, Jesus is saying he's asleep. They take him literally. Oh, well, good, he's going to get better. But no, Jesus is saying he has died in the final sense that human beings experience him in this life. But the resurrection of Lazarus proves that the death as we experience it is not the ultimate thing. It's not the thing to be most feared. And people live their lives in consciousness of death, in almost fear of death. And one of the beauties of Christian faith is it takes away the fear of death. Because really we know that's not the ultimate thing. With the resurrection of Jesus, something better is coming for all of us. So it takes away some of the fear of death. But just summarizing this chapter as a whole, it goes through this story and people can read it. Jesus greets the sisters again. We'll have more to say about that after the break. But then he goes and he raises Lazarus from the dead. And as I said, that's the last straw, raising Lazarus from the dead. And the next thing that happens, you have a council, and the council is trying to kill Jesus. So here's the thing. The raising of Lazarus is the seventh action of Jesus that creates hostility. And as a result of the raising of Lazarus, three things happen. Mary has increased faith. When she sees Jesus raise Lazarus from the dead, her faith comes up to its fullness. On the other hand, the raising of Lazarus creates hostility in the Sanhedrin, and even for Judas. It seems that Judas starts turning his head to betraying Jesus after this. Why exactly would not be clear. But more than this, it creates a lot of inadequate faith. Remember the three types of faith? The inadequate faith is the kind that gets excited by miracles. And a huge crowd goes into Jerusalem saying, Jesus raised the dead. And when Jesus rides into Jerusalem the next day, huge crowds waiting for them. Are they true believers? No, they're excited about another miracle. So the death of Lazarus creates hostility, genuine faith, and inadequate faith. All three of those in chapters 11 and 12.
Okay, well, we are going to continue on the story of Lazarus after this short break, so stay with us.